You have an immense power that runs through you that is you. It's like the energy that an archer creates as he pulls the arrow back against the bow. Grounded and guided, it's generative, helpful, and creative, and that energy is enough. Your only role is to guide it and ground it. You are the lightning rod that receives the beauty of that immense power and allows it to flow to earth without impact. However, when you lose sight of this, when you aim more towards the goal, lost in the power, this force within you is... I believe in my heart of hearts that the greatest form of activism, of actually creating positive change for the world and for this generation and then ones to come, starts in here. It starts with your commitment to nourishing and nurturing your own self, both from a nervous system standpoint, from how you create yourself and your identity, and from how you presence yourself. Less push, less work, less try, more allowing, more curiosity, more possibility.
Denise, what is missing in today's leadership?
That's a huge question. I think it's not what is missing, but how we see leadership, how we define leadership. And we don't have to look very far to see examples of a very hierarchical, forceful type of leader on the world stage, if you know what I mean. And I think the question, when that gets not only on the world stage, but when we look at how most of us are leading ourselves in our lives, whether we're in business, whether we're entrepreneurs, whether we're parents and leading a household, oftentimes what I see is that leadership is something that costs, that we have an idea in order to be successful and create success or to create the results that we want. We have to work very hard. We have to push through. We have to constantly strive. And as a result, we come from a place that is very mind dominated, very logically dominated. And as a result, we almost tune down or turn off the voice that's coming to us from our physical body. So we are less and less embodied in ourselves, and we work and we lead ourselves in a way that we push ourselves at a cost where we might have success in the beginning and it might work for a while, but eventually that price will come back and request that we pay that price sooner or later.
Mm-hmm.
So I think really it's not what's missing in leadership, but it's actually how we frame leadership from the beginning in terms of what we expect it to be and what we expect that it takes.
And now to maybe make it a bit more visual, how would you describe this? I think you had some type of leader in your mind while explaining it at the beginning. So how would you say does a bad leader look like compared to a good leader?
Well, I think the question really, we can lead an organization or we can lead ourselves in a way that is very much focused on what I need. What are my needs? What are the resources I want to get, without considering the whole, the entirety. This is a model we see time and time again, particularly in humanity. But if we look to the natural world, we never see that. We see, take for example, horses in a herd. A horse will act within the herd not only for the good of itself, but also for the good of the herd, and as a result, for the good of the living world. So there is a compound effect on the way a leader may lead themselves in the natural world. But we within our human world, particularly when we're under pressure, we don't do that. We get very, very focused on the needs of the individual. Not always, but sometimes that leads to the detriment of the collective. Look at the environmental crisis that we're facing right now today.
Yeah, 100%, especially this individuality part of focusing more on the individual is so present, especially since COVID, in my opinion, because this social element I think we had for the last decades and centuries is slowly but surely breaking, and everyone starts to live in their own world, live in a small little circle, and yeah, be fine with it. But like you said, I think not really going with the herd, but acting for the benefit of the herd and expecting that somehow the herd will give you back is something that is nearly unimaginable in today's world or when looking around us.
Would agree with you. There is a social component to it. I mean, look at what we're doing right now. We've got the technology available that we can sit here. I could sit here in my office and I could order everything I need for my food, my clothes, and have it delivered to my home. I don't have to go anywhere or see anyone. But I think there's another aspect to why we may be in this particular model right now, and it's almost a chicken and the egg conundrum, because when we are under pressure and under stress, which we have been, particularly during times of COVID, but in a way that has been building, I think, over the last decades quite significantly, is that what ends up happening within our system itself is that everything contracts and our system tends to put up the barriers and the defenses mentally, emotionally, physically, so that we protect ourselves. It's natural. If there's a threat out there, our system's going to raise the drawbridge. But by the essence of raising this drawbridge within ourselves on every level, what we end up doing is we end up separating ourselves and creating isolation. The more isolated we are, the more under pressure we are, because we are a human creature that is designed and craves connection. We're designed to thrive within connection. And the more isolated we are, the more we feel like we need to grasp at resources and look after number one, because we're feeling like there's nobody else around us. So we're going around this cycle and this kind of cascade that's continuing to create a sense of isolation, a sense of loneliness, and a sense of operating in a contracted state that's under pressure. So I think we're in a situation today where we're only compounding that state within, well, I only look around at a whole host of conversations I have on a day-to-day basis with people of all ages, and it's felt within society. I mean, I'm sure you see it too on campus and in your day-to-day.
Yes, definitely. But now going back a little bit to the leadership again. At the beginning, you meant the hierarchy, that a lot of leaders in these days are hierarchy focused, and I can only speak from my perspective, especially in research, that's super prominent, that you have the one person on the top. This person gives orders to the 2 or 3 below him. Each have a team, and these teams have a bunch of employees. And yeah, this creates a mental and a barrier that is created, of course, mentally, but that affects also someone's, at the end, efficiency, that, yeah, could be so much bigger, but is now trapped in this bubble of, I can't really do it because the person above me has to approve it or has to do this or that. And yeah, in terms of hierarchy, what would you say is a better way to approach this type of things?
So absolutely, I think what you've described, that hierarchical model of having one person on top and everybody underneath, is one way of leading. And that is the model that we humans have adopted and inserted into our corporate culture and the educational culture, in the hierarchy of a lot of families. So it's in the educational system. It's just embedded in our society. There is another way of moving, of leading, a more non-linear, non-hierarchical way of moving and living. However, that requires an awareness of the whole, the benefit for the whole. It's more about, if you look again, to go back to the living world, if you look at how the living world operates, this is how other species, have organized themselves to the benefit of the whole as opposed to the detriment of the whole. So the question becomes, okay, so what do we do today? I myself am a human being living in a human world, embedded in a human culture. What can I do? I'm feeling the pressure. I need to, because of the structure of our society, go into work and make my wage and bring it home to feed my family. And I think whilst it may not feel possible for an individual to change the system that we're operating in, it is possible for an individual to create a seed change from inside which shifts the energy of the individual and cascades outward. I can share a little story, in fact, one that I just wrote and posted a day or so ago on Substack. I was going into London and I took the train in and was switching from the train line onto the tube. Now, the tube had some signal delays that day, which meant that the tube was backed up and was quite crowded. And as I walked down to get onto the platform to catch the tube, there were people 7 layers deep. It was a crowd. And behind me, there were more people coming. So, in essence, you got kind of trapped in the crowd, which wasn't a pleasant scenario. And as I was standing there, I was looking around at how everybody was reacting to this. And there was anxiety. I heard one person say, "Gosh, I hope there's not a stampede." So I could feel from the aspect of my work, I was aware not only of my body, but I was watching the reactions of different nervous systems, different people reacting in different ways to this stressful situation. And as time went on, eventually I found myself standing behind a mother and 2 children. Now, her children were little, half my size, and she was holding their hands, but they weren't panicked. They weren't crying. They weren't whining. They kept looking at her and saying, "Are we okay?" And she kept reassuring them. And the little girl kept looking. She was right in front of me, kept looking up. But that mother's energy from the inside out was completely calm, was completely steady. And almost without saying a word to her daughter, she was reassuring her by her energy. And I could feel the longer we stood there that mother was radiating from the inside out this sense of coherence and steadiness that was starting to impact. I was watching the people around us start to come down. So whilst we may not be able to change the corporate dynamic, what we can change is our own inner state with awareness, which then cascades outward to the people who are around us, our loved ones, whoever we live with, or if we're on a team, cascades outward onto the team. I had a conversation today with someone who was a former HR director in a very big corporate, very international corporate organization. So he was used to working with teams around the world, big global teams. And we were talking just about this. And he said, we used to talk about people being the greatest resources for a company. He said, in my opinion, I don't think it's the people. He said, I think it's the energy of the people. And that, we were in complete concurrence with that. That is what we're talking about, because when we're operating in a very stressed state, in a contracted state, in a defensive state, our energy sits in a certain way within us and can be palpably felt by those around us. Your nervous system reads my nervous system all day long. It's just what happens. When we can be in a state where we can be really presenced within ourselves, really intentional with our energy, understanding what's going on consciously and unconsciously and work with that, we show up in a way that has the chance to impact other people. So we may not change the hierarchy that's within society, but we can change from the inside out our own way in which we relate to how we experience the world, and as a cascade result, then how we relate to how we experience the circumstances around us.
Mm-hmm.
Have I answered your question?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, super fascinating story, and I read it the day or the day later it came out, so it's super fascinating how just the presence alone of the mother with everything she has or happening in her life, still being there present and spreading the peace is something, like you said, a way of leading her children in a way that doesn't really emphasizes fear, but more the peace
Steady.
that she has, yes. And this also reminds me of something you said earlier, the leadership with costs. In that case, she wasn't really leading by wasting resources. Instead, it was something that happened from within. She hasn't really, how to say it, she didn't chase anything for her own good, but instead just gave it away to her children. So how would you describe this leadership cost from the perspective of the mother?
So there's a couple of things that we can pull out here that I think apply to everybody, no matter whether you have kids or not, and wherever you are, and whatever work you do, or if you're a student. I think there's a conversation around, there's two threads I'd love to pull out. One is around capacity, and the other is around how we serve others, service. So first and foremost, capacity. I believe personally that our capacity to hold our experience in life is what determines our ability to lead ourselves from that place of energetic peacefulness or not. And there are a number of different factors that influence our capacity, but when we don't have a capacity to hold, if I didn't have the capacity to stand in that crowd on that platform with people shoving into me because I was wearing a big backpack, so I kept getting knocked into and I got pushed several times. If I didn't have the capacity to hold that and I started panicking and dropped into anxiety, my experience of that afternoon on the platform would have been very different. Now, one of the reasons why I believe I have that capacity, I had that capacity to hold, and I can only imagine that that mother had that capacity, was that I wasn't coming to that scenario or that engagement depleted. We can't serve other people. I can't serve my daughter. I can't serve my clients if I'm serving from me and allowing my energy to drop. Unless I'm doing things on a daily basis to keep my energy overflowing, I will be depleting myself. But this is counter to what society teaches us. We here put everybody else first. Put yourself last. Take care, particularly women. We hear this as mothers, but I think this is endemic within society. Do everything you need to do. And when we do that to the detriment of us, what we're actually doing is we're trying to serve from a very depleted state. And the more depleted we are, the less capacity we have, the more quickly we're going to be reactive to the scenarios and situations that we encounter in our lives, and the more quickly that we will start to react in a very contracted, defensive, hierarchical way. So it all comes together.
Yeah, the capacity topic is something I want to go a lot deeper, especially in the application. How can I really now expand it to hold more? Like, for example, you said earlier, being in a crowd full of people, and seeing others like being stressed out because there could be someone pulling out a knife. So
I didn't go there, you did, but yes.
yeah, so having the capacity to just still be in peace even though everyone around you is stressed is something that not only leaders, like you said, need, but also people in general, and allowing then the energy to expand in a scenario like that. And yeah, then let's do the tie. Let's talk a bit more about your work, about how you take leaders who are paying the leadership costs and instead now working with you and having a bigger capacity, allowing more to hold. So from a very like zoomed out perspective, what would you say are the three main components of how you help leaders expand their capacity?
It's a journey. To work with, so leadership, I believe there are three inflection points when it comes to expanding our own personal capacity and and as a result, our capacity to lead ourselves, self-leadership as well as leading teams. First and foremost, understanding that there are three sort of aspects within ourselves that come into play. So we have our unconscious, which is asking the question all the time, am I safe? We've got our nervous system asking that. This is our unconscious part of our brain. It's going to ask that question and it's going to decide how we're going to move mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, based on the answer. Quite simply, if the answer is yes, great. We have the ability to remain open. Our system is saying you're safe. If it's a no, or if it's a maybe, our system is going to move us in such a way that it places us in that contracted, defended state, protected state. Then we have our conscious, the things I can choose to move my hand. I can choose what words are coming out of my mouth. However, there is a component of how I choose to be curious, the choices that I make throughout the day that are also linked to whether or not my brain feels safe. So that conscious part, we assume this. In fact, most of the time when I talk to leaders and I ask them, how much do you believe that you create your business or lead your teams from a conscious state? The answer is an overwhelming yes. But unless the answer is I'm safe, actually that conscious piece is going to be about this big. Because in order for a brain to be in curiosity, to be open, to be learning, it needs to be in possibility, all of which we need to lead. If it doesn't have safety, we can't be there. So our conscious choice, our consciousness is also impacted by that. The third component that I believe is hugely important is our presence, how we presence ourselves. Now, most of us, particularly if we've been under pressure for a long time, we presence ourselves from our ego, from the labels or the achievements that we have, from our roles, from our titles, from our traumas. We presence ourselves based on those patterns and those ways of defining ourselves, as opposed to presencing ourselves from the very, very deep essence of who we are before all that happens. So we have this interplay between these three things, our conscious self, our unconscious self, and our presence or our identity, if you will. Where is our identity coming from? And then in order to work with those three components, I believe that the first question I would ask of a leader is, where are you coming from today? Are you coming from a place that is completely calm and open and you just had a stressful day today? That's a bit of a fake statement, because I think most of us, 99.9% of humanity, would answer, well, it's not just today, it's been the last decades of my life that I've been under stress. So we've got this pressure and stress that we've accumulated through today, which we can learn how to support that on an unconscious level, on an identity level, and on a conscious level. And then we can also look at, have you been stressed and holding patterns for the last decades? And most of us will say yes. So the initial phase or the initial work is actually to not only deal with the today, to put some small interventions into the day-to-day to support the nervous system and to become aware of how we're creating our identity and how we're making our conscious choices, but also to start to dissolve some of the patterns that have come with us from the past. Once we've started that work, then what we can do is we've created a new foundation on which to stand. Then and only then can we ask the old patterns to be dissolved. Most humans believe, okay, we've got something wrong, let's go fix that. But I actually believe we've got something wrong, let's become aware of it, but let's not make it wrong. Let's not tell it has to go away. It's there for a reason. Let's go make a new foundation. Once we're standing on the new foundation, we can say to the old foundation, we don't need you so much anymore. And then from that new foundation, what we can do is we can get into the creation of something we've never done before, which is automatically going to stretch us into new territory, which is going to require more capacity. So it's kind of a multi-phased, multi-aspected process of working very gently with ourselves, with understanding, with empathy and compassion on a day-to-day basis to build a new way of leading ourselves through.
Yeah, at the beginning, when you started explaining the unconscious and brought up the topic of safety, of feeling inner safety, I instantly got reminded to the person who connected us both.
Yeah.
To Sarah.
Yes.
Because her work revolved around that.
Yeah.
And yeah, now I'm curious how you would say I or the listener could maybe build up this inner safety that they need. Is there a practice, or would you say are there some journaling prompts that they could ask themselves to they become more safe inside themselves?
So in my work, I start with the very basic foundation. What do we need to dissolve the stress that we're building up today? Let's start in the present moment. And one of the things our nervous system needs in order to allow the events of today to be processed through and left behind, and in order to begin to make the decision, yes, I am safe, is it needs some sensory information. Now, we have all sorts of different senses, not just the five. But what happens is when we're under continual pressure and stress is that sensory communication gets dialed down. I mean, how many movies have you watched where somebody's had an accident, and their arm is hanging off like this, but they're rescuing their loved one with this arm and they have no idea that this arm is like, until the ambulance shows up and then they realize and they pass out with pain. So that sensory information was turned off because in that scenario, we needed you not to feel. So the journey is to begin to offer your unconscious brain some sensory information, and joy of joys, it needs to be novel. So in my work, I take my community on a 5-minute sensing practice that's different every week. And you can repeat that multiple times a day when you're in the office, when you're walking, when you're driving, when you're in bed. You can just repeat that. It takes 2 to 5 minutes, but you have a different one every week so that you're continuing to feed novel movement, novel sensory information to your brain. If somebody wanted something that they could do, I would say go out, but don't do the same thing every day. Move your body differently in novel ways. Don't just go for a run on the same path. Jump, run, dance, do different things. Right now, today, we do a lot of stand up, sit down. So that's the first bit that I would suggest is get novel movement into play. The second part, so supporting the nervous system and understanding that is number one. Number two would be find somebody who can hold safety for you, that can be a mirror for you. This is what I do within the coaching compartment of my work, to have somebody that you can lean on that can not only reflect back to you what you're unaware of, but also to be a safe port in the storm. One of my clients asked me last weekend, he said, how do I continue to be presence and maintain my own steadiness when the people around me are not? And how can I encourage them to be? And my answer was, well, that's what this space is for. So you can lean into somebody who is safe whilst everybody around you is having their own experience. And then probably the third thing that I would suggest is spend as much time in nature as you can. Now, there's all sorts of studies that have been done around that. And when you're in nature, you want to get as curious as you can be and try to drop yourself into the states that are going to create those hormone cascades of awe and gratitude and wonder and within you. There are multiple ways we can experience nature. Most of us experience it sensorially with our senses, like looking at something beautiful or feeling the sun on our skin, or as an experience, I'm walking in the forest. But there is a way of interacting with nature that's even deeper than that. And those are the three things that I combine in my work to make it easy, to make it fit into the busyness that most of us have in a way that creates transformation, not just another management tool. We want to create over time a transformation in your capacity so you can hold more and not just continue to reset yourself from the day to day.
And this reminded me of a book that I ordered actually last week, and it came yesterday, which is The Power of the Unconscious Mind. Have you heard about it?
I haven't. Who is the author?
Joseph Murphy.
Okay. Yeah, no, I haven't. Is it good?
I haven't started it yet.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Or from the subconscious mind, excuse me. The Power of your Subconscious Mind.
Got it, yes.
But I had a few guests before who all said that our conscious brain, or the conscious part of our brain, only is a fraction compared to the subconscious and unconscious. And there I would like to ask how you ramp up the frequency of this conscious part. Like you said, first it's important to feel inner safety, to have the capacity for the conscious to strive. But are there any more techniques in order to make this conscious mind work more, to be bigger?
So I'm also digging into exploring this. I spent the weekend, was it last weekend? 2 weekends ago? 2 weekends ago, with a cognitive neuroscientist, and her work is all around how we learn. And so there were some fascinating conversations with that. And we had we spoke about the mind and how the mind works and how we learn. So I'm also researching and reading and exploring all of this. But from a conscious standpoint, one of the first things I would say to someone is watch your words. You've heard of, when we were little, I used to pretend I was a witch and, abracadabra, ptoosh. And how we speak, not only verbally with our words, but how we think in our thoughts. We are creating our worlds around us with the words that are coming out of our mouth or the thoughts that we're thinking. Now, in order to create a shift in our exterior world, we get to start internally first. It starts with an understanding of actually what's driving us. If we're in a contracted state because our nervous system is contracted, that's also going to be dictating how we feel and how we speak. So let's assume we're nourishing that part of us. The next thing would be to watch what we're speaking, what we're saying. Journaling is helpful for this. And there's some identity work that I do around reclaiming who we really are. And from that basis, creating a scaffolding and a support around who we declare ourselves to be in the world. Now, I'm very intentional about how I do that on a day-to-day basis. This isn't a one and done. Sorry, wish it was. But every morning I wake up and I reset myself. Sometimes it's just 2 minutes. Sometimes I spend an hour. But I reset myself and I remind myself who I am and how I will show up in that day. Now, all of this is not different from who I am. Who you are is inside of you. Who I am is inside of me. It's all in there already. It's just that when we've been living under stress and pressure and overwhelm and anxiety and all of the things that get piled upon us, the educational system, all of that, we forget who we are. So creating a scaffolding in your day, some people, maybe you want to do it at night, maybe you want to do it in the morning. I think it's really powerful to do both right before you go to bed and right when you wake up, when there's a softer access to the liminal space, to remind yourself of who you are and align with that. And speak the words into being. Journal the words, write the words. As we write, we start to rewire the pathways in our brain and we make connections. And the more we repeat something, the more those neural pathways get wired together. So this is why it's a day-by-day practice. Have I answered that?
Definitely. The last part was presence, and there you started explaining it through the ego. And while you were explaining it, I really got reminded of myself. I see a lot of people in my surroundings who are trapped in thinking that they can only do something based on their educational level, based on their appearance, based on something physical. So somehow over the years, I broke this mental pattern and am now at a point where I can go to basically anyone and have a conversation with, how would you say, not really techniques, but ways in order to break these mental patterns of doing something based on our ego.
I want to bring up my work with the oaks here.
Mm-hmm.
Can I bring that up?
Of course. It's a perfect connection to it.
Segue. How do we remember who we are? I think the first thing is to actually let me back into this question. The thing that happens when we're operating from our ego and when we're operating from a place of defendedness, not safeness, is that we always feel like we have to know the answer, and we always feel like we need to, you just articulated it beautifully, have the justification, have the degree, have the permission, because we're operating from a place, our brain is going to a place where it's judging everything, and we need to get it right. When we're in curiosity, we're in this kind of, think of the way like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old plays. It's like, whoa, look at this. I'm going to try this. Oops. Oh, that didn't go well. I fell down. Let me try this again. And the state of that open curiousness is a state that I don't know very many adults or even very many young people we don't go there anymore. How many times do you just dare to try something? I mean, I know you do, asking that metaphorically. So actually dare to be really, really curious and be willing to hold a question in your mind and be in the not knowing of it is a really powerful way to start to access beneath that predefined installed ego. I've been working with exploring the living world from an empathic interbeing practice for the last 18 months, 2 years now, and have started to do some work with ancient oak trees. Now, I happen to live on the edge of Windsor Great Park here in the UK, and Windsor Great Park has the greatest concentration of ancient oaks in Northern Europe. So I happen to, they're on my doorstep. I can see them as I look out the window, which is why I selected them, one of the reasons. To walk up to another species that doesn't have words, the oaks can't speak to me, to let myself stand with them and be open with the question, who are you? And wait to see what I feel, what do I sense, what do I experience, and let myself be okay with a nothingness has been really critical to almost breaking that I always know who I am, where I'm going, what I'm doing, what outcome I need, the tick boxes that we live by so many hours of the day. If I don't know the answer, let me go here. Mr. Google, tell me, so can I stand with someone, something, with myself, ask a question and just wait and not know? And maybe come back the next day and the next day and the next day and not know. And I believe there is something hugely impactful for us as human beings to be in the practice of just that. Now, what has started to happen is when we get into that place of not knowing and sitting and waiting, eventually, when we're in a place of slowing down, something is going to start to bubble up. An awareness will start to bubble up. A knowingness will start to bubble up. You may start to hear or feel or sense things from inside that have been neglected or forgotten or bypassed because you've been moving so fast for so long that awareness will start to change your presence with yourself and your presence with another. So that's one way of breaking free of the ego. I've taken my work further in terms of how I'm connecting with the trees to actually, through the glimmering of what comes through, and it usually is just a glimmer. It's like this. Why? Because our brains, our beautiful brains, are designed to make sense of the world. And when something comes up that doesn't make sense, it's going to try to make sense of it, which instantly breaks the connection. So we get things in glimmers. So I have, through my work, been inviting the glimmering, inviting a sharing from the ancient oaks to try to gather what is it, what is the wisdom, what is it that they want to share, what is it that they're offering, what is it that from their consciousness in their very long lifetime of, some of these trees are 600, 800, nearly 1,000 years old, that they could offer from a different perspective than the human perspective. And there's a huge amount of wisdom in that. There's a huge amount of reassurance in that. There's a huge amount of a sense that underneath it all, we're supported and all is well, which is not something we hear as human beings very often.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, have I gone off piste there?
Not
A
really,
little bit. Okay.
But while you're explaining it, it got reminded me of a movie I watched a while ago. Do you know the movie Arrival?
No, I don't.
Okay, so a basic explanation is a university teacher and she is teaching linguistic.
Mm-hmm.
And one day during a lecture, open the news. So the students say, open the news, there's something huge happening. And there are 12, I think, UFOs or like weirdly shaped spacecraft appearing everywhere in the world on random places. So, yeah, then the whole plot of it is this linguistic teacher going inside of the spaceship and trying to communicate with these aliens. And it's super fascinating. At the beginning, they all went in with the suit and checking if there's any air inside of it or if it's toxic. And slowly but surely, she starts to feel the aliens and understands that there's a higher reason because they're there. And I don't want to spoiler anything, but at the end, she got something from it that benefited the whole world. And it's super funny because the way you explained it earlier, how you work with the oak trees, how you try to communicate with them, was like a perfect one-to-one resemblance of the movie. I could literally see the movie while you were explaining it. So yeah, I highly recommend you watching it.
I've written it down, so I'm gonna go check it out.
But yeah, the whole topic around the oak trees is something I would like to talk about or talk now a little bit deeper.
Sure.
Starting off, yes, the oak trees are right next to you. You can literally see them. But why would you say, do they still have even more benefits than just being next to you? So what makes them special?
You know, that's a easy and a hard question to answer.
Mm-hmm.
I have been, first of all, these trees in these fields and I have a connection because I've been walking in these fields for nearly 20 years. So I know them. And I do think that there's something about knowing land or knowing trees or knowing a natural area as yours. I've spent a lot of time in it. I believe oak trees in particular are very special trees. If you look at some of the symbolic traditions, oftentimes you see yew trees in graveyards, and yew trees are often signify the life after death, but oak trees are often used as a connection to our life, our living, how we live our life, how we move through our life here on earth in this lived experience. And they do live a very long time, 1,000 years plus, some of them. And as a species, they are unique in that they support here in the UK, they support 2,300 other species, some of them uniquely to oaks. So they're a very, we were speaking before about the horses and the herd and the greater good. Oaks, by essence of how they live their life, are supreme examples of what it is to give of one's for the proliferation and the benefit of other species. They literally hollow their hearts out. And an old oak tree will have dropped branches. It's got hollow crevasses, or it's hollow all the way inside. There's one oak, I call it the open heart oak, that stands just nearby, that is literally the exterior of the trunk and hollow on the inside, and yet it's got a part of it that's growing up with a green canopy, which is absolutely beautiful to see. So all of those are sort of the biological and the social connections as to why I've been working with them. But the spiritual answer to that, I just felt called. I can't explain it other than one day I just felt like I was called to start this project with the oaks, and I did. And the wisdom that has come from them over the last, 4.5 months, has been phenomenal. And so I hope to share that with the world.
What are some things that the oaks told you or your clients that benefited you or your clients in a positive way or gave you the answer you were so long asking yourself?
Gosh, I can share I'm just going to pull it up so I get it right. I get it exactly as it was shared. So I think I did this today. Here we go. Okay. So I'll caveat this by saying a lot of what I've gathered has come through just me with the oaks, but I also do what I call oak presencing sessions with clients where we actually spend time with a particular oak that has, I feel, wanted to connect with a particular person. And I'm thinking of one of my clients, and he lived for many decades under a lot of stress and pressure, and has paid the price his physical body has complained as a result of that. But in the oak presencing session with this oak, it said what came out of it was this: you have an immense power that runs through you that is you. It's like the energy that an archer creates as he pulls the arrow back against the bow. Grounded and guided, it's generative, helpful, and creative, and that energy is enough. Your only role is to guide it and ground it. You are the lightning rod that receives the beauty of that immense power and allows it to flow to earth without impact. However, when you lose sight of this, when you aim more towards the goal, lost in the power, this force within you is destructive. Now, there's a lot of symbology in that. There's a lot of words in that. I didn't realize how impactful that was for my client. And afterwards he said, in that, it was like a half an hour, that tree encompassed his greatest challenge of the last decades in that, like that. And I say, what's unique when we do these oak presencing sessions, or when we connect empathically with another being, that connection can only exist where there is something shared between the two. So I'm in these sessions, I'm only the space holder and occasionally the translator. My job is to translate. It's not, the connection is not with me. So there was a connection between him and the tree, and this was what came out. I supported with a little bit of translation, and that was it. And the impact has been, I've had some clients burst into tears because what has come out was so aligned with what they needed to hear or wanted, in their life, or what they needed for the next phase of where they're moving into in their life. And yeah, it's incredible what can come through that when we connect, not from here. Usually in the beginning, it comes from here, and I can sense and feel when it is from here. But when we drop down into our true self, and a tree, the trees or other living beings can't connect with our ego selves. They can only connect with the essence of who we really are. So the magic of these meetings is when things like that come out of the meeting, where we humans are actually meeting our true self that we may have forgotten. I have another client who works with me in the one-to-one space. Now, she loves the oak sessions. And so we have done probably 7 of them. And what she said to me just last week, she said, even though I know I'm safe, or I know that all will be well, I feel it at a deeper level. Her limiting beliefs have started to dissolve themselves without us having to go do any excavation work on them. Just because she keeps meeting her true essence of who she is in these engagements with the trees, in our sessions together. And we do some coaching around it as well to pull it out. So it's immensely powerful, this work.
And what would you say is one of the experiences you had? Because now you shared 2 from your clients, but what is the one that deeply impacted you?
I have had many that have deeply impacted me. Even just the first time this happened, I was like, whoa. And then to go to the next tree and have it be completely different, or to go to another tree and have it be a silence of nothing or no, not yet. But I'm thinking of one tree. Usually, usually when I connect to trees, I might feel something. There's one oak I call the focusing oak, because the first time I connected with it, when you have a long lens on a camera and you're adjusting on a proper camera, not a 5 phone, the sense of twisting the lens to bring things into focus was what I felt inside my body. So sometimes it's sensory, sometimes I get an image, sometimes I get a word, just depending. But I remember walking up to one oak and putting my hands on the oak, and it was like somebody shot energy, like Reiki energy, if you've ever had Reiki done, down through it was like, and out. And I burst into tears. I couldn't tell you why. I couldn't tell you what was going on. It was just the most incredible sensation. And what has been interesting, I wasn't sad, I wasn't upset. It was just an energetic connection. In bringing a different client to the tree, she also described a sense of widening in her, what would be our center point. So yeah, I would say that probably. And all of the messages that they've shared have been beautiful.
Super, super fascinating. Now, you mentioned a few ways the oak trees impacted you, and different oak trees helping people discover different things. I now don't want to go deep into every single one of them, but could you maybe explain what type of effects these trees had? So, like you said, you had this one around focus tree, but are there other trees that are specialized in different things, and especially connected to the leadership and what we talked about earlier? So are there particular trees where you're living that are helping your leadership clients in a certain way?
Well, they all are. So there is no distinction between if we are leading ourselves personally or are we leading a team. There's no distinction. Like there's no distinction between our mind. For us in this lifetime, in this embodied state, there's no distinction between our mind and our body and our heart and our spirit. We can't parcel things. But it does seem to me, and I'm speaking of this a little bit prematurely because I'll give a little bit of detail because I will have a book coming out hopefully at the end of the year. I believe what is being shared with me through the numerous connections I've had with different trees is that what the oaks from their perspective are sharing is that there are sort of 5 stages or 5 themes around what it would be to fully embody and live life, fully express oneself in life. It's not linear, it's actually cyclical, it's circular. It goes around. And so many of the trees speak about things that have to do with presence, who we are at our essence and how we connect with who we are in our presence. Then there are the trees that are speaking more about flow, the actual allowing of movement, the safety that is actually involved in the cycle of things. We tend to think of change as being difficult and disruptive, but actually that constant flow and movement is key. And when we have a presence, when we can presence ourselves and be in the flow of things of life, then we have the capacity, I believe, from the trees to step into fire, resistance, stretch, challenge. And it's when we can do those, we're able to have the capacity to hold that challenge, that then we can step into freedom. We find our own personal, inner, spiritual, and collective freedom, which then brings us to the 5th thing that the trees seem to be speaking about is curiosity and love. And I say curiosity and love because curiosity is how we express ourselves, but love is what is felt. I see the two as interlinked, which then brings us back into a deep presencing within ourselves as to who we are in our true essence, and around we go again. As a leader, when I used to work in corporate and lead teams, I remember thinking, well, I've got to show up in a certain way. I've got to be a certain way. Today, I ask myself the question, as a leader, how can I presence myself? How can I be in the flow? How can I have the capacity to hold the experience of my life and the experience of what's going on around me so that I can be free within myself and support others in their own freedom and not only receive love, but be love and give love through my service, through how I am in my day-to-day. That's what's coming from the oaks. And I believe that to define ourselves as our leadership, to define leadership in that way means that we create a kind of leadership that doesn't cost. We create a kind of leadership that is in service to the world, to the collective, to all living things, to the planet, to the animals, to the plants, to other people, because of how we show up day to day, moment to moment in our lives. That's what they're sharing.
Interesting. And super excited to one day read the book and go deep into it, because this 1.5 hour talk is maybe just the surface of all of it.
And there's more coming through. I mean, I'm not done. I'm still meeting them and capturing what they're sharing, and absolutely.
Now, one of my last questions about the oak would be how someone at home can feel it. Should they go out, find the oak and trying to communicate with them? Or is there something before that in order to create this pathway between you and the tree?
I think one of the reasons why I'm able to do this work is because my system is safe. I'm not defended. Yes, there are moments, but I'm of stress and pressure, but I'm intentional about cultivating my ability to return to myself on a day-to-day basis. So returning to yourself. And it doesn't have to be with an oak. The oaks are what have called me. You could do it with a rock, with a tree, with a horse, with a blade of grass, though that might be a different kind of connection because, I would say to try to cultivate a linear and empathic connection and empathic interbeing would be to approach something with an openness and to just hold the question, who's there? And it might be weird. And if you get something that's weird that doesn't make logical sense, then you're probably not in your thinking brain assessing. Oftentimes what I get with the oak trees in particular, because, I feel rooted or I feel strong, is a very, very common thing. Because we have a metaphor within our culture around rooted and strong for trees. How many guided meditations have you done? Rooted and strong for the trees. But it's when you get something that's a little weird or a sensation like I got that you think, well, I couldn't have made that up because that makes no sense to me really. So there might be something there. But going and sitting with just the open-ended question and allowing yourself to connect is 90% of the value. Yeah, it is cool.
Yeah, I think today we covered a lot of topics.
Yeah.
We started at leadership. What is today's leadership missing, or what's the wrong perception of it that we have? Then we went over and talked about the interconnection of the unconscious, the conscious, and the presence, and then wrapped it all up with the still early but everyday maturing work around the oaks that you're doing. That sounds super, super fascinating. Denise, is there anything else we still need to cover around your work? Or is there anything you still want to say to the listener around your work, around the oak trees?
Well, we've touched on this a little bit, but I think I believe in my heart of hearts that the greatest form of activism, of actually creating positive change for the world and for this generation and then ones to come, starts in here. It starts with your commitment to nourishing and nurturing your own self, both from a nervous system standpoint, from how you create yourself and your identity, and from how you presence yourself. And allowing the process of doing that to be more gentle than society indicates it needs to be. Less push, less work, less try, more allowing, more curiosity, more possibility. And the more of us, I have a vision right now of raindrops falling on an ocean, the more of us that can meet day-to-day life with that as our energetic fingerprint, I just see that being the sea change that the world needs. Not only the world, but all of us as individuals and the world. So I would love to leave that as an idea with your listeners to consider how you could potentially explore that for yourselves.
Amazing. Thank you, Denise. And are
Thank
there
you.
any last words you still want to say?
No, it's just an absolute pleasure to sit down and to have this conversation at leisure. Thank you so much, Abby.
Thank you as well. Bye.
Bye.